This is Sean, the Mindful Farmer. I was trying to make this video a little closer to my garden, but the chickens are being so loud I could not even record anything. So I wanted to let you know kind of what we're up to. It's been a while since I posted on YouTube, but we're in the process of kind of getting everything changed over for the fall and the winter garden. For us, that means flowers. This is our first season to not really grow a lot of vegetables. We're just growing flowers. So that's a little different for me. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're taking out, what we're planting, what I'm starting, and then things I'm doing for the soil and things I'm doing for our greenhouses. So the first things are, what are we taking out? Most of our crops are about wrapped up. Powdery mildew has taken over the zinnias, and so those are getting ripped out. The last thing that I'm kind of holding on to and still planting to finish out summer are sunflowers. And I did a whole video, it might have been my last video, on sunflower production. Check that out. I do ProCut Excel. It's like 40 days to maturity. And so even up to September 15th, I can still plant those and still get sunflowers before the first frost in mid-November. But that's about it. That's the last of the summer things. Fall, for cut flowers, the things that we're planting right now are gonna be things that overwinter. Things that we're starting now, things that overwinter. And so those are either hardy annuals, which means it lives one season but it can live through a winter. It's either a biennial, which means it lives 2 seasons, goes through a winter, flowers the next year, and you can plant those same time, in the fall with your hardy annuals. Or even some perennials, hardy perennials that flower in their first year. Not all perennials do, but some do. And so you can plant hardy perennials. They'll go through the winter, bloom the first year, and you can take them out and then replace them with something else. So those are the things we're starting. I'll go through a list of what we're starting for the fall and the winter, and kind of show you how we're starting our seeds. I don't have my germ chamber. We don't have a lot of room for kind of a big setup, so I'm going to show you my kind of solution to make a seed starting couch. I know it sounds crazy, but I'll show you what I'm talking about and then hopefully show you the final product. So we're doing, we're getting our seeds started. We got to get our soil prepped, and so that means flipping the beds. I call it flipping the beds. Taking out the old crop, amending, getting the soil ready, and then getting the new crop in. And so for us, that's using the broad fork to loosen the soil. Our house is in the city, and we got a lot of clay in the backyard. And so we're still working on improving our soil. So the broad fork helps bust up that clay so the organic matter can get in there. All the good microbes and microinvertebrates can get oxygen and kind of do their thing in the soil, help improve the soil. And so we're gonna broad fork. We're going to amend, we're using parboiled rice hulls. And so it's the hull off the outside of a grain of rice. And Arkansas is one of the biggest rice producers in the country. We got a lot of it and we can make good use of it. It kind of is a substitute for perlite. So it helps take up space in soil and helps hold oxygen. It's not super absorbent like peat moss. It's more like a space holder like perlite. And so I had started doing that at Heifer Ranch, adding the parboiled rice hulls to like heavy clay soils. And it really seems to help with like the tilth and the lightness of it. It helps really lighten them up. And as it breaks down, it's just like a slow release fertilizer. It probably takes like 2 or 3 years for those rice hulls. They're so fibrous to break down. So you get a good bump until you can get that organic matter really cranking if you're adding compost, things like that, or cover cropping. So it's a good kind of like immediate kind of boost until those natural processes can catch back up. The other thing we're adding a lot of is nitrogen, because we're going from a cash crop to a cash crop, something we're harvesting to something we're harvesting. As plants grow, they use up the available nitrogen in the soil. And then if you immediately plant something new after that, after you cut the other plants away and remove them, there's not enough nitrogen available for those plants. And so adding nitrogen between cash crops, either through, you can do it in like really short cover crops, that's probably the most preferred method. You're growing your own fertility, you're not importing it. You're capturing nitrogen out of the air and putting it into the soil. But a lot of folks don't have a long enough season to get a cover crop of a nitrogen fixer in the middle of the season. So what I do is I do my cover crops through the winter. So things like a winter rye mixed with clover. The clover is going to fix the nitrogen, the rye is going to hold it in place, increase organic matter. And so I'm actually growing my own fertility. I'm fertilizing through the winter, and then I work that into the soil, or I can crimp it, terminate it in some way. And from the research that I found, like most of that nitrogen is going to be available about 30 days after that cover crop dies. So that's also something to keep in mind. If you are growing a cover crop, you don't just terminate it and immediately have nitrogen. It takes time for that stuff to break down and the microbes to release the nitrogen for your plants. So cover cropping is probably the best way. When you can't, you can amend. A lot of people amend with compost that I see, especially in the market garden world. Compost isn't a great source of nitrogen. It's more your other minerals, salts, and organic matter is mostly what nitrogen is. It's more like your trace nutrients. For nitrogen, what I've been using is ground up chicken feathers, and that's worked really well because it's 15 to 16% nitrogen. It's slow release, so it takes time to break down because of all the complex proteins in the chicken feathers. So you're not going to burn your plants if you put too much. And then it's because it's so high in 15%, one bucket can do a full bed. And so you don't need a lot of it. So that's really nice. The other things that I would be adding would be things like phosphorus and potassium, things that help blooms. If you grow tomatoes, you know that phosphorus and potassium are really important for healthy bloom and fruit production. And so I do need those. Before I even get anything in the ground, I'm gonna run a soil test. So I try and do a soil test at the beginning and kind of middle of my season, which are my 2 plant dates. Like I'm planting in March and April, and I'm planting in June, July, and August. For planting in October for our overwintered flowers this year. And so having an up-to-date soil test is gonna be really important for knowing what exactly I need to put into my soil, because if you add too much of one nutrient, you can actually kind of bind up other nutrients in the soil. Too much calcium can make the phosphorus hard to get to. Also, pH is radically going to change what nutrients are available and in what quantities. So as you change your pH, whether it's more acidic or more basic, there's lots of charts you can actually look up online. Do pH nutrient availability, and you'll see this chart. And as the pH shifts, you can see the amount of calcium that's available decrease or increase. So I would check that out too. So those are really important numbers to have, is your available nutrients, your pH, and then that rice hulls is just for like tilth and soil texture, improving soil texture. So compost is not a cure-all. You really probably need other stuff. I use compost more like a mulch than I do a soil amendment. It's like a slow release mulch. So those are the things we're getting ready in terms of the soil, getting things started. I'll take you all inside and show you our little couch germination chamber grow space. And the other things that we're doing, see how noisy those chickens are being? Goodness. Other things we're doing is getting the tunnels ready. So these tunnels behind me had some old plastic on them, and we're gonna replace that with newer plastic. It probably wasn't at the total end of its life, but I'm also raising up the tunnels because we're doing flowers in there. We've noticed that we need more height on the sides. So these are the first tunnels I designed, and they are a lot shorter than my new tunnels. The new tunnels I'm doing are much taller and allow for this sort of thing, so I don't have to do that. So I'm having to put kind of like a lift kit on them to raise them up, and so they need new plastic. So these tunnels will get roll up sides. Behind me, there's gonna be 3, they're 14 by 18 foot tunnels, and those will all be filled with mostly poppies, mostly Icelandic poppies. And then we may try and do another bed of violets again. We weren't happy with how, just didn't feel like they were tall enough last year. And so we may try again a different variety and see if we can get some taller violets out of that. So those will be ready in like February, March, April. So yeah, so let me take you inside and show you what I'm starting and kind of tell you my crazy idea for this couch grow light situation. Just trying to work with our limited space. So in terms of the winter flowers that I'm growing, I've used this sheet from Johnny Seeds. If you just Google Johnny Seeds Overwinter flower trials, seed date calculator, it'll show you their recent trials they did on overwintered flowers, and they even have it broken down. It's like you can put in your frost date and it'll tell you what dates you need to be starting seeds and when you need to be transplanting. So things that we're growing are digitalis, which is foxglove, dianthus, which is carnations, snapdragons, bupleurum, probably said that wrong, violets, larkspur, Icelandic poppies, scabiosa, nigella, ami, dara, ornamental cresses, sweet peas, and there were several others. I'm starting some lupine, and also I'm doing some clones of some perennials to overwinter, things like hydrangeas and things like that. So let me show you kind of our setup. I'm in our sunroom. It's a very small room. It's about 10 feet by 10 feet. So I wanted to show you this to just kind of give you an idea of like, work with what you got. And life is crazy, so figure out solutions that are, fit your needs in your space. But this is kind of like our quiet time room. Let's see if I can turn you around. No. So this is our kind of like mudroom, quiet time room. Melanie found this really cool chair. So that's usually where she's hanging out, enjoying a cup of coffee. And then we got a cool little chair. And then we started drying out some flowers. So we're putting hooks in the ceiling, which we'll have to repair when we sell the house. But yeah, just drying out some flowers. Want to play around with some wreath type things. But this is what I wanted to show you. This is where we're starting flowers right now. So these are 528 cell trays. There's 528 little tiny cells in there. I think these guys are snapdragons. So I seeded all these by hand. So like right here, there's already 1,300 plants in these 4 trays. So I do that because I really didn't have a lot of space, didn't have a lot of grow space. When I was working for a farm last year, I had, a big germ chamber. So now I'm kind of making up my own space as I go. My plan for this area though, because this is, where we hang out. If we have people over, we don't have a big house. And so, we can let the kids be inside and play, and then the adults can come out here on the sunroom. We got like lights around the ceiling. So it's like a nice place to just sit and hang out. And so my plan for this area is actually to put another one of these racks up here and then get a cushion for the top of it. So I'm going to build like a little wooden platform and then put cushions on top of it. And the idea is that it'll actually be about the same height as the couch, and then we'll increase our space, but we can also still have a second layer of lights and a rack for our plants. So that's my wild idea, to have plants underneath the couch. And so I'll make another video if that works out. But, one of the things that, we just didn't have room for a big shelf. There's just no room to put it in the house. So you just got to work with what you got. And so that's what I got. I have limited space for a big shelf. I need more seating, so I'm going to put my plants under a seat. These metal racks are really cool. They're called dunnage racks. Before the pandemic, when everything got crazy expensive, they were pretty cheap. I think it was like $40, $50, something like that. They hold like 300 or 400 pounds. Restaurants use them to keep food off the floor. That's a food safety issue. You can't just put bags of flour on the ground. You got to put them on something. So these dunnage racks, and they're aluminum. I've had them outside for years. They don't rust. I got them for my honeybees. So I would put down, so in order to keep from having to weed eat around my beehives, and because I was leasing space, I didn't want to do anything too permanent. And I'm a stationary beekeeper. I'm not moving around all the time. So it's semi-permanent. I would put down landscape fabric as a weed barrier, kill the grass, and then put these Dungendrax on top of that, and the beehives on the Dungendrax. And so it helped keep mice out of the beehives. It helped keep the beehives off the ground. And then these racks are really easy to stack up, and then I'm using them for other purposes. And so I have a bunch of beehives on them. I use them for storage. I'm using them for these grow lights. If we get into a bigger space and we have the opportunity to, put in shelves or hopefully, a germ chamber, then, I can easily take off these lights off the Dungendrax and then put the bees back on the Dungendrax. So, one of the things I'm going to say all the time on this channel is that we want to have, sustainability through thoughtful design. And I want to be able to reduce the amount of things I'm buying for the farm, homestead, garden, whatever, and be able to reuse them often and for multiple different purposes. So these Dungendrax have been huge because they'll last. I'll pass them down to my grandkids. They'll last forever, and they do so many things. So those are really cool to have. Whereas if I made it out of like wood, like I knew I'd be throwing it away in a few years. And so, yeah, sometimes it's worth like springing to get the metal or the more permanent option because it's just going to be around forever, and especially if you can use it for lots of purposes. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys are thinking and getting excited about fall and winter. I was talking with my friend Jill about just like what a shift that is in our minds as, she's moving on to a space that has a high tunnel. Just thinking about what it's like to get excited about growing through the fall and winter. Whenever other people are kind of like done with the garden, when they're sad that the tomatoes are gone, like the fall and winter is my favorite time to farm. And for me and for folks that are getting tunnels, that's such a paradigm shift. That's the opposite of everything you've thought when you think of gardening. Think of starting in the summer, wrapping up in the fall when it gets cold. But for me, I feel like my season starts in the fall, goes all the way through the winter, and then around like August when it's unbearably hot is when I'm kind of like, I'm kind of done with this. If I could, I would like just take the summers off and farm all fall, winter, and spring. So thanks for watching. If you're interested in a high tunnel, I am manufacturing and installing them right here in Arkansas. US made products. Check out mindfulfarmerarkansas.com. And if you have any questions about getting ready for the fall or winter, send me an email, Instagram message, or leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.